what we're going to get started with is a little video, and then we will launch into our session proper. So if we could have the video, please.
Yeah, just one moment now.
Hi, my name is Shane Halpin. I'm the CEO of VC in Dublin. We are an international development and humanitarian organisation. So while we work with marginalised and with people with disability, there's a nagging feeling that we should be doing more to engage with people with disability. And this has crystallised as a result of our engagement with the EU VividT project. In a nutshell, VividT's main aim is to move towards greater disability inclusion in the international development sector and volunteering. It's opened my eyes to the fact that 15% of the world's population has a disability, either acquired or from birth. 15% is a huge number. What organisation can effectively ignore 15% of its target market? But this is what we've been doing in our sector.
Rachel Ryan, Projects Officer with VC.
So, how do we become more inclusive in volunteering and humanitarian aid work? Well, according to our research, a collaborative approach with more engagement and outreach is needed. We in the development sector need to talk to organisations of and for people with disabilities and their networks. Together, we need to engage with donors generally, and with EU volunteering programmes in particular, such as the European Solidarity Corps, to get them to commit to providing funding for reasonable accommodations and supports for people with disabilities.
We need others in the sector to start the journey that we have been on, to learn what needs to be done. We need to combine our resources, and we need to engage with the 15%. So what can you do? There are some practical steps you can take. You could review your policies and systems and services to make sure that they are fit for purpose. You could involve a person with disability, for they're the experts. Be an advocate for change with your funder. We need to make reasonable accommodation mandatory in your funding programs. Join a disability forum in your own country. Will you join us?
For more information or to get involved, visit www.vcvolunteers.ie/disability.
Hello everyone again. So in today's session, we're going to be exploring the new course that has been designed by VC in partnership with Abilis Finland. It looks at the links between disability and climate change and how people with disabilities are affected by climate change. We're going to be hearing from some speakers, expert speakers from the different themes that we're looking at today. And we're also delighted to have a representative from Irish Aid Global Citizenship Education. Great, yes. Sorry, I just had a visitor just checking everything all right. I guess it is, I'm here. But before I launch into a longer description of what we're doing, I'd just like to introduce Shane. Shane is the CEO of Beatrice Christie and has led VC through this journey on exploring disability in the context of development. Shane.
Thank you, Lou, and a very good morning to everybody. Sorry about all of this. It was one of those mornings, I think. So, very good morning. You are all very welcome to the launch of our new Global Citizenship Education course entitled Disability and Climate Change. This has been a project that we and Miriam Hockey at the team at VC have been working on over the last 14 months in cooperation with our Finnish partner and disability organisation, Abilis Foundation. All I can say is that it's been a bit of a journey organisationally over the last few years when I, as CEO, felt that we are in need of a major overhaul in our understanding and in our awareness of disability, not just in terms of the partners that we work with, many of whom work in the disability sector, but with our own fundamental understanding of this area as an organisation active in the development sector. I'm delighted to say that we continue to learn and grow in this area, and today's launch is one step further on the journey as we seek to make our own training more accessible and inclusive. The Irish part of this project, which has been so generously supported by Irish Aid, has been to help us research and develop course content for Irish audiences, as well as supporting our organizational journey in the provision of accessible global citizenship education. With this support, we have begun to adapt our own training programs to become more inclusive and accessible. In this regard, I am delighted that we're joined today by Anya Doody, Head of Global Citizenship Education at Irish Aid, along with a wonderful panel of experts from the field of training, climate change, ecology, and disability. So once again, thank you all very much for coming. And we at Viatoris Christi hope that you will find the morning thought-provoking and inspiring. So I'll pass it back to you, Lou, if you'd like to take it forward. Lou is involved with us. Lou is Institutional Fundraising Manager for CBM Global Disability Inclusion, although recently she served as Programme Manager for CBM Ireland, which, as some of you know, is one of the leading names in disability action. Louise was also one of the EU Vivid partner projects that helped us start in this journey into disability inclusion. So thank you, Lou.
Thank you very much, Shane. So I have lost my notes. Sorry. Hello, everyone. Hi again. You're probably sick of hearing my voice, so I'm going to stop in a second, but I am delighted to be here. It's fantastic to see the work that VC are doing in the field of disability and now connecting it with climate. CBM has been really delighted to work with VC over the past few years on the topics of disability inclusion and humanitarian action. And so seeing this project and this course as the natural fruits of that work is fantastic. So a big thank you to the speakers that are going to be joining us today, to our sign language translators, our captioner, who we will hopefully get to hear from at some point, and all of you for joining us today. A reminder for myself as well that it's particularly important to speak slowly and clearly. And if I'm going to ask now, as we get into focusing on different speakers, if people could turn off their videos if they're not speaking. It also helps with being able to follow the sign language interpretation. So as I said before, you're very welcome, all of you, to share any thoughts in the chat. But any questions that you have will be left until all of our speakers are finished, and we'll have a session of Q&A. We will also have, after the speakers, we'll have a little bit of a breakout session. We'll get to discuss the themes of our webinar today, and you'll get to meet some of the other participants. But before all of that, I'm very delighted to welcome Anya Doody. Anya is the head of Global Citizenship Education at Irish Aid, and Irish Aid supported with the development of this course, and they are also supporting this event today. So Anya, if you are here, we're really looking forward to hearing from you, and over to you. Aha, I think you might be muted still. Oh, go ahead, Anya, we can see you. Oh, but we can't hear you. I'm not sure what the problem is. Nope.
Hear me now?
Yes, hello, welcome. Go ahead.
Morning. Sorry about that. I got a new computer, so clearly there's a couple of issues with it. But thank you very much. Thank you to Lou and everyone, and Shane and everyone at Viatoris Christi for inviting me to say a few words, for inviting me to the launch this morning, which we're delighted to support this work. I work for the Department of Foreign Affairs. At the moment, I'm working on the Irish Aid program. So, and the themes of this course, we're focusing on disability and its links to climate change, are really core issues for the work of Irish Aid. In two areas of our work, I mean, most of our work is in overseas development cooperation. And having spent a number of years in Uganda recently, I'm very aware of just how central disability rights and disability justice is to our work. I think it's an area though that we're working hard to get better at in recent years. We, in our work overseas, we work with a range of partners who have different roles to play. We partner with civil society, with the United Nations, with government, all of whom have key roles in addressing disability rights as well as climate justice. I think civil society has a particularly important role to play, both locally and globally, in advocating for policy reform and action, and of course action being the most important, on these on disability rights and as well as climate justice. So my work at the moment is focused very much on global citizenship education, which is a relatively, from a budgetary perspective, a relatively small but a really key part of the work that we're doing. It's focused here in Ireland, and it's all about building awareness and understanding of global challenges. So traditionally, we've done a lot of work in formal education in schools and universities, but in recent years, we've really tried to work to increase our engagement in adult education. So we're delighted that adults are the key focus of this learning resource. So I'm here. I'm looking forward to hearing more about the course, and thank you again to all at Viators Christi for inviting us to speak this morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anya. It's lovely to have you. Now, our colleague Miriam is going to share a little summary of the course itself. So over to you, Miriam.
Thank you. Cormac, are you happy to start the very short PowerPoint presentation? So yes, I just wanted to give a little bit of background to the course, how we developed it, and a very quick overview of what the course covers. Change the slide, please. So as we've said, there have been a number of partners involved in the development of this course, and we appreciate very much the support from IrishAid particularly. Next slide, please. So to start this whole project, we initiated it with a piece of research. We reached out to different organisations and individuals to find out and ask about these particular things, the content, the topics. Are there particular themes or topics that are of interest and relevant for audiences with disabilities? Learning outcomes, are there particular learning outcomes that we should be focusing on? What are the pros and cons of an online module in terms of accessibility? And then also the current levels of accessible Global Citizenship education online provision and the main challenges with that. So next slide, please. What we found was very interesting. To begin with, the subjects, the topics that were of particular interest, obviously climate change and environment was the top one, which is why we decided to focus on climate change, but also human rights, disability rights globally, and gender and disability were also of real interest. Next slide, please. We also found that there was some common cross-cutting themes that were of particular interest to those who were part of the research. Interconnection came out extremely strongly, highlighting how decisions made in one part of society can have a positive, negative, or unexpected impact on others. Also, collaborative learning and actively realising rights, active citizenship that empowers and supports individuals and communities to realise their rights. Next slide, please. We also found that when asking people what they wanted from their learning, it was quite clear that there was a set of knowledge that was of interest, so issues, information around issues that affect us all, understanding, so how to apply that knowledge within different contexts, but also very strongly skills for action and change, how to take action and make change happen. Next slide, please. We also found that there was a call from those who responded to help help them improve their confidence, both in taking action for positive change on a global level and around global issues, but also on the personal level, influencing decisions that affect them and their life directly. So that's something we also tried to consider in this course. Next slide, please. We considered technical issues and user experience throughout this. Things like internet connection, the accessibility of an online platform, how easy, logical, intuitive it is to use. Also issues related to personal context, so things around cost, internet reliability, but also the learning model, group or collaborative learning, asynchronous or synchronous learning. So there was a lot of thought that went into what we would create, the actual structure that we would create for the course. Next slide, please. So after all of that research and after all of this finding out, we built on that information and put together a proposal focusing on climate change and disability. With the support of Abilis, we started to research the subject of climate change and disability. And what we found was that there was very little comprehensive content existing out there. And where there was information, it was often very specialized or technical or related to only one aspect of climate change, such as a particular climate disaster. So we wanted to create a general introduction, an accessible introduction, regardless of learners' previous levels of knowledge. So to do that, we worked very closely with Abilis and drew together academic studies, research reports, articles and blogs, also relying very heavily on the internal knowledge of Abilis, and sourced original case studies and brought those together to create the content. We then looked into the development of the online format, considering the feedback we'd had about the pros and cons of functionality and how to make a course easy to use, clear and accessible. After that, we went out for review and testing. We had a set of testers via Abilis with varying different access needs, and then also a set of testers from Ireland who were able to give us very comprehensive, across the board, very comprehensive feedback, which we then reviewed and finalized the course itself. So next slide, please. So I just wanted to give a very quick overview of what the course contains. We have a general, to start the course, we have a general introduction to global citizenship and climate change. And then we look at the concept of disability. Personally, I found this section particularly eye-opening, and it made me really think about barriers, existing barriers in a way I hadn't previously. We then looked at disability and climate change and the impact of climate change on people with disabilities. And then also created a section on personal stories. So from those case studies, the majority of the personal stories are built from those case studies and give a real insight into the lived experience of different people around the world. For me, I think this is one of the most interesting and impactful parts of the course. And then finally, we looked at active global citizenship, helping people understand what change means and how change can happen, and considering that. And then also some resources and links, both to further information on the subject, but also to organizations or movements where people can continue to take action. So next slide, please. The next few slides, I just wanted to give a very quick overview and a very quick visual of the course. So these are screenshots. You can access the course either via the link that we've already sent out or via the Upskills, the Via Toris Christi Upskills training website. You can see it there. It's free of charge. Next slide, please. This is the format of the course itself, and we tried to make it as clear and as intuitive and accessible as possible. So as you can see, quite a clean layout. Next slide, please. We also wanted interactive elements. So I've just got a couple of examples of the interactive activities within the course. This is a map where you can click on little pins and the personal stories come up. And the next slide, please, Cormac. And here we have a set of flashcards that you can turn and find more out about. Next slide, please. So now that we have this course available and working, what happens next? What we're looking at now that we've completed the course is developing a facilitator's guide. The course is designed for individuals, but now we want to explore how it could be used in group settings or within workshops. We also want to expand the resources and links section and continue raising awareness of the course and getting it out there. We're also we're going to begin looking at other subjects or other topics that could be a future development and potentially create more courses, more accessible courses like this. So finally, I would like to say, I would encourage any of you who have any thoughts, ideas, or contributions to any of these points on this slide, to please do get in touch with us. We would be very interested in hearing from anyone who might be able to add value to this work going forward, particularly around these areas. So thank you. That's the end of my presentation. I hope that's given you a whistle-stop tour of the course and its content.
Thank you so much, Miriam, for sharing. It's really interesting to hear that the course that was developed has very much been representative of VC's own journey. So VC has been working in the field of development for 60 years and has become very active in the field of disability inclusion in the last 4 years or so. So this course is very well suited for organizations who are just starting their journey of disability inclusion, and having VC's experience feed into that on that journey is really valuable. We've had a couple of questions about the slides and the link to the training. You were all sent a link to the training itself during registration, but we will of course send it again afterwards, and we will be sharing the slides. So we will be sending those out to all participants who registered on Eventbrite. So thank you so much to Miriam. We're now getting into the very exciting part of our session today, where we're going to hear from our speakers who are going to be sharing some reflections on the intersections between disability and climate change, and why a course like this is so valuable at the time that we are in now. So we are going to start with Douglas Bourne. We are very happy to have you here, Douglas, today. Douglas is a Professor of Development Education and Director of the Development Education Research Centre at University College London. He is the Chair of the Academic Network of Global Education and Learning, and author of books such as Theory and Practice of Development Education, Understanding Global Skills, and Education for Social Change. Within UCL, he chairs a cross-institutional initiative on cultural understanding and is an active member of the university's strategy on sustainability. Prior to establishing the Research Centre in 2006, he was director of the Development Education Association in England. So Douglas Bourne will be sharing with us from his point of view regarding global citizenship education and the value of a course like this. So Douglas, if you could, there you are, you've been pinned, hello. I would like to hand over to you, you're very welcome. Just a very quick reminder that we have 5 minutes per speaker. We're running a little bit over time, but please use your 5 minutes. And if anyone has any thoughts or questions, feel free to share them in the chat, but we will save questions until after everyone has spoken. Over to you, thank you.
Thank you, and very pleased to be with you all this morning. Yes, so in my sort of day job, one of the things I try and do is promoting interconnections, and I was very pleased to see that Miriam mentioned the term interconnections between a whole range of terms and issues that are very common in our society today. And to me, I felt that seeing this course was very timely in terms of many of the issues that we're currently talking about. all too often I find when people talk about disability, climate change and global citizenship, they tend to be put in separate boxes. And very rarely are they often linked together or brought together with an overarching vision of how we can work towards a more just and sustainable world. And what I particularly liked about this course was particularly the personal stories was a way of bringing many of those issues to life, because I think one of the challenges a lot of people have when they talk about these issues is they can seem to be quite daunting and quite distant from a lot of people's everyday experiences. So making connections to the real world is, I think, very important. And that's one of the things I particularly enjoyed about looking at the course. My own research and teaching these days very much focuses on the theme of hope. I've written around the concept of, influenced by the Brazilian educationalist Paulo Freire. It talks about a pedagogy of hope. And I think one of the things I try and do, particularly at this current challenging times which we all live in, that it's important for us as educationalists, of people working with civil society organizations, that we promote a sense of positivity and a sense that change is possible. And to me, that's where a global citizenship perspective becomes very important and very central in that regard, because by having a concept of a pedagogy of hope, that actually change is possible, and that it's up to ourselves to be part of that process of change, we can then make connections to the things that concern people. Because in my mind, particularly lots of the discussions around climate change have often promoted a sense of doom and fear and a sense of anxiety. And from conversations I've had with some of my colleagues at my own university, we need to move from promoting a sense of anxiety to how we challenge a sense of anger. That many people of all ages are concerned about the current global situation and how we can engage with that. So then when we bring that in, that connection issues around disability, to me, that needs to be framed in the context of rights. And I think by framing some of these issues within the context of human rights and the rights for everyone to engage and make a contribution, to me is, I think, very important. The other thing I just wanted to raise in terms of my initial comments on the report is the final reference to a sense of activism and engagement. Because I think one of the challenges that can often emerge in courses like this is that we can produce simplistic answers to issues, and that all people have to do is to get some form of social media engagement and action. And I think what that can often ignore is that forms of action and activism should be informed activism. And therefore, to me, what's important, therefore, in courses like this, and I would suggest in terms of developing the outcomes of courses like this, is that we present learners of whatever ages and backgrounds they are with a range of options and possibilities, that actually these issues are not simple, they're not simple solutions in terms of moving forward. So to me, my sort of point would be is how, when we promote a sense of active global citizenship and connecting disability and climate change, we do so in a way where people can feel involved and connected to their own real life experiences. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing, Douglas. Really interesting to hear that point of view, and especially the importance of interconnections. Like your point on that is really important, because it's so easy to see these things as separate from ourselves, any issue that doesn't directly impact on our lives, but it's very much not the case, because these things are also connected. I would like to invite our next speaker now. Sean McDonough is a Colombian priest and ecologist, and he's known for his strong advocacy against environmental degradation and its impact on global poverty. His understanding of environmental issues and the relationship between faith, justice, and ecology was awakened during his work with the indigenous Toboli people in the Philippine island of Mindanao in the 1970s and 80s. He's very active in urging the Catholic Church to embrace an ecological conversion, advocating for environmental justice as a core Christian activity. He was also chair of Greenpeace Ireland in the 90s and is author of numerous publications around the challenges of climate change and how they connect with faith. His latest book is a commentary on Laudato Si, which was Pope Francis's historic encyclical on environmental and social issues. So, Father Sean, we are delighted to have you with us. And quick reminder of the 5 minutes again, but looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much to you all. And I'm very interested to listen to what you have to say, particularly in the context of disability, which I wouldn't have given a lot of time to thinking in my own life. As you said, I became involved in the environmental movement in the 1970s when I went to work among these tribal people in Mindanao. And I saw that here in Ireland, we have 26 trees which are indigenous to our country. But there in the Turcock forest, you could get, in a single hectare of land, you could get 100 or 150 trees, which are. So I began to see the extraordinary destruction that was taking place of the natural world, and I began to write about it. My first book was To Care for the Earth, A Call to a New Theology. I wrote that in Mindanao, and I sent it to my sister here in Ireland to see could she get someone to publish it. And she couldn't get anyone to publish it. They were not interested. Those involved, for example, in many in Latin America or places like the Philippines were focused on liberation theology. But there was very little about the extraordinary destruction of nature that's taking place in our time. So in actual fact, when I came home in 1985, that's when I got the first book published, To Care for the Earth, A Call to a New Theology. I would have to say that during the pontificate of Pope John Paul II and Pope Francis, Pope Benedict, very little happened in the area of our understanding of the destruction of the natural world itself. In those years, I worked with the World Council of Churches. They were the ones that turned up at meetings. They brought along scientists with them, and they brought theologians with them. So it is only when Pope Francis was elected, and he decided to give some thought to what would happen to the natural world, which he did in Laudato Si, which is, I would believe, the most important encyclical ever published by the Catholic Church. What we have to learn from climate change is we now are 1.2 degrees above pre-industrial level. And in this year and next year, it might increase very dramatically because of the El Nino function off the coast of Latin America. So it might even go to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial level. The reality is that will have enormous impact. The weather in many places will have enormous impact on people. So that's what we have to constantly remember about climate change. It's not just a theory, or it's not something that will happen to someone else. It will happen to all of us. And that's why we need to be very, very careful in getting proper policies in vogue at this time. And one of the areas that I've become familiar with, for example, recently I wrote an article on fast fashion and climate change. And it makes it very clear that, for example, the fast fashion which we see working its way around the world at the moment, it's responsible for 8 to 10% of climate change. And 75 million women actually work in this area. And yet an enormous amount of damage is being done at this time. And very often I meet people who are very critical of my generation, of what we have done to the planet, but they are very much involved in this fast fashion, which we should begin to look at ourselves. So one of the other issues, what I would just say is, as it's become clear that many different groups will have to change the way they live, there are groups that are now refusing to do that. And you see it particularly in Brussels. For example, in our farming tradition here, it has changed dramatically in the last 40 years. And in Ireland, we from farming, 37% of our greenhouse gases come from farming. But are we going to change that? And at this stage, people are saying, well, we're not going to change it. And the same is happening in almost every reality in terms of climate change. That yes, there's a lot of talking about it at this time, policy makings at this time, but actually there are particular groups who don't want to see any change taking place. And the same is true of the destruction of species. I mean, we are in the process of wiping out 41% of all the plants on Earth in this century, which is extraordinary. I mean, the last time something like this happened to our planet was 250 million years ago, after the Triassic period. So we need to take these things much more serious than we have at the moment. We need to focus on groups who do not want to change, and yet we have to say, if we don't change, the impact of these things, climate change, the destruction of species, the destruction of water, will be absolutely problematic for every generation living into the future. So I'm delighted that you've taken climate change. I'm delighted you've brought the context of that with disability, but also I hope that you will challenge the reality of our understanding of climate change, that we must begin to do something about it. That's the reality. And whether it's flying or whether it's the use of our car or anything like that, they have to be looked at, because if we don't, the consequences for people will be enormous, and it will happen very quickly. It won't be 50 or 100 years from now. Like if we go up to 2.7 degrees above pre-industrial level, that will have an enormous impact on our planet. And for example, there's a study published by the University of Exeter and Anchen University saying that 2 billion will be exposed to extreme weather towards the end of the century unless we do something about it, which is extraordinary. So I just leave you with that. I think I'm delighted to be part of this. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to go away in the next few minutes, but thank you very much for listening to me. Bye.
Thank you so much, Sean. It was fantastic to hear from you, and you're absolutely right. The key is that everybody speaks up, because there needs to be this change, and if we keep quiet, or if we think it's only certain people can make noise about this kind of thing, there won't be change. And you know, your point about those 2 million people will be affected, you know, very, very soon. 15% of people globally have a disability, so that's a huge percentage of that 2 million even. So thank you so much for sharing. Our next speaker now is Miro Michael. Michael is a dedicated advocate for the rights and inclusion of people with disabilities, and he is chair of the Foundation of Hope, one of VC's community development programs in Masaka, Uganda. He has a range of expertise on disability advocacy, women's rights, youth, and the elderly, and he is a human rights activist who works to empower others and generate awareness around the disproportionate impact of climate change on marginalized groups. He is country representative for the Danish Association of Physically Disabled and principal labour office of the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. Miro, it is fantastic to have you here. We're really looking forward to hearing your reflections on this, particularly because you have spent some time already working on this issue of disability and climate. So again, the reminder of the 5 minutes, and a note to participants, any questions, please do feel to put them in the chat and we will get to them afterwards. Over to you.
Thank you, Louis, and thank you, everyone. Happy to be here, and I thank VC for organizing this and then to be part of the discussion on climate change and disability. And thank you for the introduction. Actually, on a good note, I feel like I'm back in Goa because that is where I had my master's degree in public advocacy and activism at the University of Goa. So when I'm speaking to all my Irish friends here, I just smile. I feel like I'm back home. Climate change is really a very big issue, but we have to understand that persons with disability generally don't understand it at all. And there is still a very big gap on the connection between climate change and disability. So this online course, I think, is going to be a good bridge and a strong bridge to carve up the information on this. As you're all aware, when we talk about disability, it is a combination of the impairment and then the barriers. So climate change is coming as a barrier in the lives of persons with disability because itself, as climate change, is leading to disability. And I'm working in Masaka and rural communities where I've seen, because of the circumstances that are coming up because of climate change, persons with disability are acquiring various impairment. And if we don't address it, we are going to see more of this impairment coming up, especially during floods, during famine and others. But again, also, apart from causing the impairment itself, climate change, on the other hand, has been a very big factor in the lives of persons with disability. For instance, among women with disability, climate change is causing high rate of gender-based violence because these women with disability, they can't access water, they can't access enough food for the family. So it is affecting their homestead, and which is causing conflicts into the homesteads. We're also looking at climate change in terms of especially persons with intellectual disability and persons with spinal injury and persons with mental injuries, where they need a lot of water to sustain their hygiene. And then in rural communities, most of them now, water is very scarce and they cannot access this water, which is also now leading to issues to do with sanitation and the effect. The other thing also we need to appreciate now currently, that most organizations that are addressing issues of climate change, they have limited knowledge when it comes to disability. So the issue of inclusion is missing, and I'm seeing as this course as becoming a bridge where organizations that are addressing issues of climate change and bring into the aspect of social inclusion and disability and gender being a key aspect in these issues. But again, also, there's also still a very big space between disability, aging, and climate change. If you look at now the current trend and the knowledge, there is little information when it comes to disability, aging, and climate change, and nobody is addressing these issues. And yet these are big factors in the lives of persons with disability and the aging population. So I'm also looking at the issue of where we have to bring on board a number of organizations and stakeholders that are addressing issues of climate change to listen to the voice of persons with disability and then also the aging population in this sense, so that they get to know, one, to appreciate what do I need to do as a person with disability when it comes to climate change. But those who are addressing the issues of climate change, where do they have to put more of effort? So I feel this is going to be a very good starting point, and I would encourage everyone to take on the process to learn about everything so that we can be able to bridge the gap and then overcome the barriers that persons with disability are facing when it comes to climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. It's incredibly impactful, and I think a really important reminder to hear of the very direct impacts of climate change on the lives of people with disabilities in so many ways. I mean, just in that short talk, you mentioned gender-based violence, you mentioned water and sanitation, all of, it's whole of life. So that's why a course like this is so important for getting getting people moving and taking action. Our last speaker now is Alex Wyatt. Welcome, Alex. Alex Wyatt is the Global Citizenship Education Programme Coordinator at Global Action Plan. So he works with schools and community groups to support climate action. His background in English language teaching and education in emergencies helps him to craft engaging climate education experiences. He currently lives in County Clare and has recently discovered a passion for bouldering. That's a lovely, interesting fact. So we are really looking forward to hearing from you, Alex. Again, reminder of the 5 minutes, and reminder to participants, you're free to put your questions into the chat and we will get to them afterwards. Over.
Thanks so much, Lou, and thanks to all of Vitor's for inviting me here today. I suppose the perspective that I guess I can contribute to the discussion is more from the perspective of kind of GCE practitioner. We at Global Action Plan, we use global citizenship education to support individuals to be a bit more aware of the global root causes, I guess, of the climate crisis, and then to support them to take local actions that are meaningful and informed. And I guess I'm particularly speaking from the perspective of our adult education program that is funded by Irish Aid. It was one of the programs that Anya Dooley mentioned earlier. When I'm thinking about the topic of climate change and disability, I'm really I remember what one of my university lecturers said around, if you're trying to understand an innovation, the fairness of an innovation, you need to really centralize the perspective of individuals with disabilities and try to understand what's happening from that perspective. And I think she was mostly speaking about from an education perspective, but it absolutely applies to anything, be it sort of an architectural or sort of a public engineering thing, but super relevant to the theme of climate change. And also our climate actions as well, because of all these interconnections that Michael was so clearly talking about there, and Miriam raised as well, all these interconnected features of yes, we're trying to do something positive in terms of climate action, but what are the repercussions and what are the consequences for individuals who are living with disabilities? And, we need to, and so I'm very, very conscious of that when, so I'd like to share you maybe something of our experience of working with individuals with disabilities. In the last couple of years, we've had more and more requests to explore this topic from organisations like Walk in Dublin 12, Prosper Fingal, who are based in Fingal as well. Amazing groups that have really clear positive sustainability agendas and really keen to bring their service users on a journey and to make climate change and climate action relevant to their lives. And so we've been working quite closely with those. As a practitioner, though, I'm finding that so actually from those workshops, one thing that's really stood out to me is that the people that we're working with are really very able to imagine and to predict how climate change is going to affect them, and also to think about how. And there's also there are a lot of things that were coming up in workshops where that people are they are not fearful exactly, but apprehensive perhaps about how climate action really is going to benefit them or interact with them. An example of that might be that one participant in a workshop talked about trains and public transport. And yes, while there's a great movement towards increased and better public transport services, they shared that they really, really don't enjoy the use of public transport in their day-to-day, that there's so many challenges about delayed buses or late buses or unpredictable trains and things like this. And so just from that perspective, as society as a whole needs to do better and to include the voices of people who are living with those experiences. So we wanted our global citizenship education programs to sort of support individuals with disabilities to advocate better for themselves. But we also know that we needed to incorporate perspectives from the global south. We need to sort of build participants' knowledge and in this area so that the actions they take can be informed by that global perspective. And I really found it very difficult to find useful resources and things that would help me as a practitioner to make these interconnections and these actions real for our participants. Which is why when I got in contact with Viatoris Christi around this resource, I was so happy to see all of those things that Miriam had mentioned and that Michael had mentioned there as well, around the diversity of perspectives. I find that I can really imagine using that. That's exactly the kind of thing that I was looking for to bring into these workshops with to support individuals to understand, you know, this how marginalization and disability and poverty perhaps layer on top of each other intersectionally, and just to make those things and those experiences real to other people. So I think I'll finish there, but I'll just say that I am really, really looking forward to using this resource with the groups that I'm working with in the future. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alex. It was fantastic to hear from you. We are now going to just move into a couple of questions. So we have 2 questions to ask our speakers. Well, in fact, actually, one is for our VC colleagues. So Miriam, when you were speaking about the course before, we have a question in the chat from Bridget, who asks, will the course seek to give participants an opportunity to engage directly with the natural world? This engagement is so important to develop earth literacy and not simply academic knowledge. Miriam, if you would like to share.
Thank you. Yes, no, it's a very, very good point and a very good question. What we've done in the course, because we're trying to keep it to a general overview, the course itself gives an understanding of how climate change impacts the natural world, and also sort of has a call to arms that change and action on a personal and a global level is needed, is positive. What we have done as well is at the end of the course, we have developed a list, a signposting list for people who want to find out more, for example, more about the impact on the natural world, but also directly to organisations who can help them take action, become fully engaged. So we've also got lists and signposting to organisations, movements, or websites that can do exactly that to really get them engaging with the natural world. So I would say if you have any thoughts on more links, more organisations, we could include that to help encourage that type of connection, then that would be really helpful to have that shared with us. So I hope that's answered the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miriam. We've one other question, which is for Alex. We have a question around using the course in global citizenship education work. So it'd be helpful if you could just share briefly, what ways are there in which you think that this course could be used by groups or organizations in order to do more collaborative learning and perhaps then utilize that in taking action?
Thanks, great question. So I suppose there's 3 things that I think are really powerful that I'm excited about using this course. The first thing is that building that informed kind of perspective. I think the discussion of barriers and sort of how climate change and disability interact to marginalize people sort of in different contexts. I think that is really, really powerful and something that I couldn't, as a practitioner, as a facilitator, I couldn't really come up with that myself, or I couldn't, you know, meaningfully without that research and without that level of knowledge. I think that, yeah, that's there in that course. So that's the kind of the information and the knowledge, I guess, that's contained in there is incredible. And the perspectives, I mentioned it already, but I want to say it again, is because looking around for resources that amplify the perspectives of individuals living with disabilities in the Global South, and not a lot of that is there. Now, CBM have some really good materials around that, and I've adapted those in the past, but this is a resource that is tailor-made to for this context. So I think that's another powerful one. And then the structure of the course kind of leads from that knowledge towards sort of a more informed action. And the action part, I think, and I'd have to check with Miriam here, but it's kind of quite open. It stresses the need for action, but I suppose it leaves it open to people to interpret what that might mean. But it does give, I think, a facilitator and a group sort of the prompt or the support to say go for it. So those are three things that I think, from my perspective, are really positive about using this.
Thank you so much, Alex, for sharing on that. Yes, you're right that the course is really, really practical. And if people take it perhaps with a sense of, I'm going to apply this to my work, then it should really inspire some movement, shift into more disability inclusion in the kind of global citizenship education work that people are doing. So we have a question just come in there from Patrick, which again, I think is directed at VC. Probably another one for Miriam, I think, which if you could just answer quickly, which is, could the course be used as an introduction to disability and climate change, or are there steps before this to introduce participants to the topics?
Thank you, Patrick. Yes, it's an introduction to, so there is no need for particular knowledge beforehand. We aimed to make it a general introduction to all the topics, and anyone could take it with more experience or knowledge of the subjects or very little. So yes, no prior learning needed. It's definitely a good one to start exploring and introducing the topics.
Thank you very much, Miriam.
Oh, and shall I just, there's a quick one from Jenny just saying, how long approximately does it take to complete the course? It's between about 20 to 25 minutes, but you can stop and start, so you don't have to do it all in one.
Oh, so it's very much bite-sized, an introduction. Brilliant. I also just wanted to note Nora's comment in the chat, saying it would have been nice to hear a personal story of disability experience versus climate change. So we had some lovely examples from Miro Michael, but there are some also in the course itself. There are some anonymous case studies of people telling their stories. So there, I'm afraid we don't have time to get into any further detail, but the course very much listen to the stories of lived experience of people with disabilities themselves. So I recognize the time. We really wanted to give people a chance to actually discuss together your thoughts on the importance of a course like this. So we are going to now move into breakout rooms. Just a reminder, if you want to be in a room with an ISL interpreter, please private message Cormac. He's one of the co-hosts. But just within the next couple of minutes, we are going to be sorted into groups. We have a question which for you to think about, which I am just going to check to make sure I have it. Okay, 1 second, hold, oh, there it is. Okay, so there is a plan to develop a facilitator's guide for this course so that it can be used in face-to-face sessions, or that groups can take the course and then come together to discuss it afterwards, to provide more of a community aspect to the content. So what we would like to ask of all of you in your breakout room is, what would be helpful for you to see included in a facilitator's guide? So, for example, what would it be useful for a facilitator to think about when facilitating this course to a group? So we're going to put that question in the chat, and we are going to be divided out into groups. Cormac, if you want to let me know how long we have. Oh, right, he's ready. Okay, right. You can accept your invitations, and we'll see you in 5 minutes. You've got 5 minutes to chat. Okay.
Lou? Oh, I'm not sure what happened to Lou. Oh, there we are.
Lou is here. Sorry, everybody. Can I blame technical issues if it's just that I got distracted? I'm going to do that. Yeah. Okay. So I hope you had a really interesting time in your breakout rooms. Sorry that it had to be a little short, but we're really looking forward to hearing from you. I believe that there was somebody nominated in every group to feedback in the chat. So if those people could share your notes in the chat box, and then we will just have a quick look at them. We are almost coming to time, but we're really looking forward to hearing your feedback. In fact, just while we're waiting for the chat, if there's anyone who is really keen to share verbally just something interesting that came out of your group, we would really love to hear from you, and you can feel free to just unmute and give us a comment.
Yeah, group 7.
Hi, Rose.
Hi, everyone. Group 7 was 3, and we looked mainly at 3 things: the types of disability, or recognizing diversity so that everyone with a disability is included. And then the second one was looking at different supports, different forms of support needs in order to accommodate everyone with a disability. And the last one was to make sure you have the resources and to enable you have the other 2. The first 2 ones. So those are the 3 points we discussed, because the time was too short. It's like we're starting and then we ended.
Yeah, very quick. Pauline.
Yes, I was the scribe for group 2. Again, very good points, but very short time. Very briefly, first of all, to be aware, the facilitator needs to be aware of the diversity of participants taking the course, who include both people with disabilities and those without, to use more visuals and to reduce the speed and ensure that facilitator speaks plainly and uses clear and understandable language. Second issue raised was the importance of having linkages to activist groups to encourage people to take action at a local level or nationally or internationally, to build practice into the learning. Also, mention was made of resources related to disability and resilience that have been developed by other organisations, such as the Red Cross, games on this area, and CARE's Climate and Resilience Academy. It was suggested that drawing on these resources and looking at ways for collaborating with the work already being done by these organisations would be very useful. And finally, also the need to take account of the impact of that on daily life of people who are caring for those with the disability. For example, the cost of additional electricity and other fuels, and more material and more focus on examples of people's lived experience, both in terms of climate change and disability and the interconnection. So that's
Fantastic.
it. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline. Some fantastic points from your group. I'm seeing a lot of really interesting feedback coming in now. The importance of accessibility, you're right. So the course has been, at the moment, it stands as an online course, but accessibility for in-person discussions is a different question and always needs to be considered. We've got points around the importance of the diversity of disability. So there's mental health is a key point, and the intersectionality of gender and disability. So it's really important to always take into account all of the factors that intersect and are intertwined with disability. Then I think the importance, as you mentioned, Pauline, is coming up multiple times of lived experience of people with disabilities. And in a face-to-face environment, there's a lot more space to involve even more of that than what is included in the course already. There's also mentioned the importance of involving as many people as possible. And I completely agree, because it's not just, say, the people who are doing your implementation or project design that need to be aware of these issues. You've got your finance so that you can do inclusive budgeting. You've got your board so that they can drive on strategy in disability inclusion. There's a lot more really interesting stuff coming in, and I think what we will do is share a lot of this in the follow-up emails that we'll be sending. Very good point about preparedness for emergency situations. So the intersection between climate change and humanitarian work, because of course, when you're talking about the impact of climate, you're talking about extreme weather events. And then of course, fighting over resources can lead to I've lost my word, internal conflict, which of course, again, affects people with disabilities disproportionately. So we are going to just have a quick wrap up. There's been mention again of please share course notes and the link to the course. So we will be following up everybody who's registered with a link to the course, a link to the slides. We'll also collate the notes that were shared from the group so that people can then utilize those when they're using the course themselves. And there will also be a link to an evaluation for this session, which we would love if you could do. And that link will also go into the chat. So thank you very much, everyone. We've got just some final wrap-up points from our colleagues Miriam and Shane at VC. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you all for taking part in that discussion. That's going to be hugely valuable in the development of the Facilitators Guide. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. Some of what I've been hearing, there's some really interesting points around, the sort of information and the learning, but also how does it lead to activism and action and positive action, and how a facilitated process can support thinking through that whole process, that whole sort of line of steps, and really move from the global through to and what does action personally mean? What can individuals do? What can we all do? So thank you. I really appreciate that. That's some fantastic feedback, and I'll be reading those notes very carefully whilst writing the Facilitator's Guide. As I mentioned before, if anyone feels they have any further ideas to share on the Facilitator's Guide, on the resources and the links section within the course, there was mention of a few resources and organisations that I think we need to make sure we've added in there so that we can signpost people. It would be wonderful to have that feedback. So please do feel free to get in touch with myself directly or with any of my VC colleagues. If anyone feels they can add value or have ideas or thoughts that may be able to improve the work and the future development, we'd strongly encourage you to get in touch. The other thing we also wanted to let you know is that this is the main Irish launch of the course, but in collaboration with Abilis, sometime after September, we'll be looking to launch at a global level as well, so another dissemination event. Now, if anyone has an opportunity to either use the course within a group setting, or once we've got this Facilitator's Guide, test it out for us, it would be fantastic to have some case studies or some examples of how the course has been used. So please do let me know if you're interested in working with us a bit closer on that kind of thing. But also, if you're interested in being kept in touch with how things are going and the international launch itself, please do let us know, because it would be wonderful to have a strong so Irish contingency, and some examples of people who've already engaged with the course at that event particularly. So once again, thank you very much from me. This has been hugely valuable, and I really appreciate the time you've taken to be here today and support us in this work. So thank you, and I will hand over to Shane.
Thank you, Miriam, and thank you for all of your participation and all the hard work you've been doing on this. Yeah, my own reflection on listening to everybody this morning, apart from the drama at the beginning, trying to actually put disability inclusion into action. It's not as you can see, it's not as easy as one might think, because of all of the realities of trying to get everything to work effectively. But it's so important. Reasonable accommodation, as Michael referred to in his talk with me earlier, the importance of making reasonable accommodation for people with disability is so important. And it's a journey. It's a journey for us all. So my thanks to Anya from Irish Aid and all the panelists, Doug and Alex and Sean, of course, and Michael for the very inspiring and thoughtful input and reflection today. I think it's fair to say that the reflections are confirmation of the importance of our small steps in becoming more accessible and inclusive, while at the same time it underscores the imperative to keep climate advocacy and action at the forefront of all our development interventions. A word of sincere thanks to all who helped put this launch together, in particular Circa, Zara, Carol and Cormac on our technical support, to our interpreters who have worked under a bit of pressure there today, and closed captioning support, to Miriam, of course, again, for all their expertise, to the Abilis team of Tomas and Lena and Rhea, who continue to journey with us, as Miriam says, as we introduce even more audiences to this powerful resource. And finally, my thanks to Louise, who so graciously accepted my invitation from CBM Global to assist us today as compere, and of course to you all for your attendance. So thank you. As the rally cry goes, a luta continua, the struggle continues. So thanks again.